Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha television. You're watching our special program in the lead up to the general elections, India Votes 2019. I'm your host, Frank Rausen Pereira. Over the next 1 hour in this special telecast, we will look at how the Prime Minister has led the country from the front. Brave decisions were taken by the government without dragging its feet. The need and success of some of those decisions have been questioned by the opposition, widely debated in the media, and have been part of our public discourse. The decisive leadership of Prime Minister Modi was seen as a pleasant change from what the country saw during UPA 1 and 2. In our program today, we will do a reality check of 3 of those decisive decisions: demonetization, surgical strikes, and action against Naxalism. So the first decisive decision that we are going to look at today is, of course, demonetization. And on the evening of November 8, 2016, Prime Minister Modi, in a move that would have a far-reaching impact, announced the demonetization of all 500 and 1,000 rupees banknotes of the Mahatma Gandhi series. The aim of the government was to put an end to the black economy and reduce the use of counterfeit currency to fund illegal activity and terrorism. The weeks that followed demonetization saw cash shortages and disruption in the economy. The government cited several reasons why the brave decision had to be taken and how it helped. Here's a look.
On his very first day in office, Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave a display of his decisive leadership. On 27th May 2014, in the first cabinet meeting of the Modi government, the centre brought its fist down on corruption and the black money menace. The centre formed a special investigation team to investigate black money.
In the light of the directions of the Honorable Supreme Court, we have constituted an SIT for unearthing black money. The head of this SIT is Justice M.B. Shah, former judge of the Supreme Court of India. This proposal, which was approved by the Cabinet, comprises very high-profile officials as well.
The SIT made several recommendations over the next 2 years, leading the Modi government to make a surgical strike of sorts on black money. In a major step to tackle the problem, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the demonetization of the currency notes of 500 and 1,000 with effect from midnight that night. The move made notes of these two denominations invalid, a major assault on black money, fake currency and corruption.
Country has felt that corruption, black money and terrorism are fast-running source holding us back in the race towards development. We have decided that the 500 rupee and 1,000 rupee currency notes presently in use will no longer be legal tender from midnight to night, that is 8th November 2016. This means that these notes will not be acceptable for transaction from midnight onwards.
As he made the announcement, the Prime Minister said his government had been fighting the menace of black money and corruption since assuming power 2 years ago, and urged the people of the country to join the fight.
Now we again have an opportunity where every citizen can join this Mahayagna against the ills of corruption, black money and fake notes. The more help you give in this campaign, the more successful it will be. It has been a matter of concern for all us that corruption and black money tend to be accepted as a part of life.
मोदी जी के इस हम फैसले से बहुत खुश हैं। थोड़ी परेशानी तो उठानी पड़ेगी, लेकिन आगे जाकर बहुत अच्छा है ये
फैसला। बिल्कुल ठीक है, उसमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। बस ये है थोड़ा भीड़ है, लेकिन मैनेज करेंगे। अब अच्छे काम को सराहना करने के लिए कुछ तो परेशानी उठानी पड़ेगी।
सरकार का फैसला अच्छा फैसला है। थोड़ी सी दिक्कतें हो रही हैं, पर कोई बात नहीं।
A year after demonetization, the Prime Minister said that 125 crore Indians had fought a decisive battle and won.
Well, let's now listen into what experts have said about demonetization.
The structural reforms that have been conducted in India in the last couple of years. Now, of course, the demonetization that took place, of course, collapsing 40 different taxes into one single GST is a monumental effort. And given the implementation associated with it, it's hardly surprising that there is a little bit of a short-term slowdown as a result. But for the medium term, we see a very solid track ahead of the Indian economy.
And to talk about the decisive decisions that were taken by Prime Minister Modi and his government, I have with me on the program today Shekhar Iyer, senior journalist, KV Prasad, senior associate editor of the Tribune, and Praful Ketkar, editor of The Organizer. Thank you to my guests for joining me on the program. Shekhar Iyer, I'd like to begin the program with you. We're talking about decisive nature of this particular government and of the man at the helm, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Was it a pleasant change that we saw from the previous governments, UPA 1 and UPA 2?
No, more than pleasant change, I would say it was seen at that juncture as something that was need of the hour, need of the time, because there was a feeling that things were on a free fall. And there were compulsions within the kind of coalition alliance which Dr. Manmohan Singh was heading. And something had to be done to put the system back in that pace. I think that is why you saw some of those decisions had to be taken. Because the Prime Minister Modi had two choices. One, he could have just gone on and trying to fix here and there. But probably he felt before he decided on larger economic decisions, at least he should start on a clean slate, in the sense, tackle this problem of black money. Because there have been, nobody knows exactly what the figures were, what is the extent of parallel economy. Right from the time when R. Venkataraman was finance minister, the figures that were being, talked about was something like 80,000 crore as a, kind of a parallel economy. And in 2016, anybody's guess was it was over and above 1 lakh crore, but nobody had an idea. But the feeling was this kind of parallel economy, and with the tax base, at least, the number of people paying tax was very small. So it was felt that a lot of people were making money, but were not paying anything to the government, and government's own revenues were dipping. And in order to extend large welfare schemes to reach out to great many of our poor people, you need to increase the government's revenue, because you cannot go on taxing those the small group, particularly the middle and the lower middle income, regular salaried class. So it had to be done some stage where you increase the tax base, push up the revenue, and use that revenue for more of those welfare schemes. Number one. Number two, you go in for basic economic changes, some of the big schemes that you intend to do, big kind of investment, but those things will have to be done on a clean economy, because all those countries that have done well on economy had to tackle this problem at one stage or the other, whether it was America, France, UK. This was a problem which they had to tackle. So therefore I think it became a need of the hour, and it required a political will to take a decision of that kind, because the demonetization was an isolated decision. After that, you saw a series of other actions. The crackdown on fugitive economic offenders, which was the last, but which was a logical conclusion. But before that, you had the Benami Act to tackle the people holding property on somebody's name. Then there were other, then on those other actions that were taken, which all seemed to be one adding to the other. The basic idea was, if our economy has to be robust, then it had to start with fixing the system.
Right. KV Prasad, Shekhar Iyer just pointed out that how there was a political will that was needed to go ahead with a decision like demonetization. The fact that Prime Minister Modi also had the mandate, had the numbers behind him. What did it make it the job a little more easier?
Definitely. You see, once you have a clear mandate in Lok Sabha, house which has the key to has the power of the purse. The fact is, he started very fast, and the idea was, as Shekhar was saying, you see, one decisive push has been what Shekhar was referring to, increasing the tax base. Now, on an average, 2.5 to 3% of the taxpayers is what the base was. So, if you're trying to push that, it will take a little time, definitely, to move that. I think other thing which is most significant that takes a longer time is to make India a documented economy. Most of the Western capitals where we often refer to had documented economies. So, you have very good databases. You have people who are economically tagged to the government revenues and so on and so forth. So, the question of moving away from it becomes, so I think a series of steps were taken in that direction, and this is something which obviously takes time. This is in a way a course correction that was waiting to happen. We've had various discussions over the period of time, and this was a step forward in that direction. So, that's how I look at it.
Professor Ketkar, the nature of the person as well. Prime Minister Modi, to try and tackle these issues head on. A word on that.
See, you are talking about a decisive leadership. What is a decisive leadership? I personally believe, leadership that has a vision, and a vision that influences and inspires people so that they will stand by the leadership. There are, economic ways of looking at it, how Janadhan was started, and then how, the things were linked to Aadhaar, though later it, faced some legal hurdles, and then coming up this decision. If you see in an integrated fashion, the entire mandate for this government was actually on anti-corruption plank, and Prime Minister Modi and his government had to deliver on it. So, the vision he tried to show during the campaign, that had to be realized. And if you see, I am not talking in terms of outcome of the decision, I am talking in terms of the way the decision inspired, shaken the system, the way, when you decisive leadership, breaks the status quo and make everybody stand by that decision. Even though there is a criticism, there will be a feedback or constructive feedback or negative feedback, whatever, but stand by the decision. So, you could see people standing in the queue, people standing, and still saying that, whatever happened is happened for the good. I think that is a key factor, and there Modi as a personality played a key role in sustaining these kind of decisions. I believe in any kind of situation, and many globally also made this remark. Incidentally, I was outside India the way the decision was declared, and the immediate reaction, even many of the international participants were there in the conference, and they were saying, anything like this would have happened in our country, it would have been a riot-like situation. It didn't happen in India, though some narratives were built against the decision. That shows that the leadership played a key role. The vision, the decision, and the way that vision and decision actually inspired and influenced the people. As far as the impact is concerned, people, economists can think of whatever the outcomes. But I think that was a key factor, and there Modi as a leader clearly stood out.
Shekhar, the decision, do you believe, was also taken because there was a poll promise made by Prime Minister Modi? He spoke about how he would crack down on terrorism, he would crack down on black money, I beg your pardon, he would crack down on this whole black economy that we had, and also, corruption. The plank that he came to power was on tackling corruption. So, something had to be done as far as what he said before he came to power in 2014, and that's why he went ahead with this decision?
No, there was that commitment on his part that he should be seen as a leader who carries out what he promises, whatever he has pledged to do. And so therefore, when it came to demonetization, I think he did not think of demonetization as such in the beginning. The other, he was looking at ways to curb the black money problem. And perhaps he realized that the tentacles of black money was such and so enveloped in the system and enwrapping the system, he felt that he had to do something very drastic, some kind of a shock and awe, and he had to bring in a surprise element. So the decision had to be kept secret. Consequently, you saw the way the demonetization was announced, leading to initially, people queuing up and people feeling that yes, it is. You just showed people their first initial comments that it is difficult, but then this is something we wanted
for the nation.
The feeling was the rich were getting richer, and they were getting richer by means fair and foul, and they did not bear the burden of the state in terms of what it needed to do for those poor sections. So the feeling was, okay, we are put to difficulty, but at least the rich will be called to answer for their wealth, which was seen as something ill-gotten. And also the feeling was that the political class, all these years had allowed this kind of people to amass money by way of corruption involving government decisions. And that corrupt money was in the shape of this black money holding, Benami properties, as well as and avoidance of tax, because tax evasion also formed an element of corruption, for which the system seemed to be rather cooperating rather than confronting. So I think given this kind of scenario before the Prime Minister, he probably felt this, because he could have perhaps done it, because post the demonetization, when other issues came up, the way it affected the unorganized sector, other sections, because this debate has been going on. Could it have been done at a later stage when the economy had picked up? Because this is one question which has been debated even by the Prime Minister within himself, because did I do it at the right time, or could I have done it better? I think that question remained. But the thing was, he felt probably before the economy gets into the takeoff stage, he must get the field clear of all these potholes which always pull down the growth of this country.
Right. Despite the initial troubles, KV Prasad, there was a lot of criticism from the opposition. There were several people who were grumbling about standing in long queues. General populace also talking about how they did not have cash in their hands. Despite that, demonetization was followed up by other measures to support that particular move. What does that say about the Prime Minister?
Well, essentially that shows that you have thought out what was required to be done, and having taken the first step, follow it up with subsequent steps which actually push you in the direction, be it, as I mentioned to you, the going digital, plastic money, which has been in vogue in this country but not so high, that of course, and then you have no electronic modes of transferring money. All these steps were all dovetailed into this idea of how to support demonetization. Criticism is bound to happen because people went through what they went through, we heard that, and all of us have experienced, but then everybody took it in the stride. Because the larger image, the larger narrative that was that it's for a good cause, a cause, as Shekhar had pointed out, to try and clean up the situation. Remember, this government, as Praful had already pointed out, came in the backdrop of corruption, huge reports of corruption, and also one more big thing happened. If you remember, between 2009 and 2014, the industrial or the business community talked about policy paralysis. Now that was something which was dragging down the economy, had shaken the confidence of investors, or the economy was moving, but it was clearly not on the path it was intended to. So all this was inherited at the time, and so when you went into the campaign, the BJP under Mr. Modi went into campaign, they highlighted all this, that we'll do this course corrections required. So obviously this is the path that was taken.
Okay, one final question before I move on to the next segment, Praful Ketkar. Is this demonetization going to have an impact on the upcoming elections?
See, we have gone through series of elections after that, and in terms of impact, if you see the immediate major election that we saw was perhaps the UP election. and I covered UP election on the ground, and the reactions that I could get, especially from the very lower middle class or rural voters, was amazing, which we perhaps could not judge from sitting here in Delhi. So one of the reactions that I got was, please, he asked me when I probed, will UP still go for Modi and BJP, despite such hasty decision and this kind of implementation, and he was very reactive, and the person said, do you understand, a person has risked his political career for us and the nation. Now conveying that message, communication is very important in leadership. Another important thing is, you spoke about the criticism from opposition, but another important aspect of decisive leadership is, he actually took on many of decisions. He took the opposition almost off guard. So if you see the initial reaction, right from Congress to Chandrababu Naidu was this side that time, everybody was as if, this is a historic decision, we are going to stand by it. They started criticizing on the implementation aspect later, but first 2 days it was off guard. And you see that even the decision like 10% reservation for the weaker sections from general category, right, for example, there also off guard decisions where opposition was initially compelled to stand with the government and making it a national issue. Again, this through his ability to inspire and to communicate, he successfully did that. Again, Prime Minister Modi as a leader stood out there.
All right. On that note, then we'll slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll talk about another decisive decision that was taken by the government during its tenure of 5 years. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. This is India Votes 2019 with me, Frank Pereira. Well, the second decisive decision that we will look at is the surgical strikes conducted across the border. The strikes took place in September 2016, an action that was needed after the Uri terror attack carried out by terrorists from Pakistan.
Anguished by the loss of Jawans, Prime Minister Narendra Modi warns Pakistan.
जम्मू कश्मीर में, उरी में हमारे पड़ोसी देश ने जो एक्सपोर्ट किए हुए टेररिस्टों ने हमारे जवानों को बलिदान होना पड़ा। आतंकवादी कान खोल के सुन ले, यह देश इस बात को कभी भूलने वाला नहीं है और आतंकवाद के सामने न हिंदुस्तान झुका है, न हिंदुस्तान झुकेगा, आतंकवाद को परास्त करके रहेगा।
Minister Rajnath Singh says surgical strikes gave a strong message to the world.
यह कोई छोटी सक्सेस नहीं है कि वह पाकिस्तान जहां से टेररिज्म स्पॉन्सर किया जाता है, आज वो टेररिज्म में पाकिस्तान इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी में, पूरी ग्लोबल कम्युनिटी में एक प्रकार से आइसोलेटेड हो गया है ये कोई छोटी सक्सेस नहीं मानी जाएगी, बड़ी सक्सेस है।
India achieves two strategic goals with the surgical strike. The Modi government was able to isolate Pakistan internationally. It also came as a morale booster for soldiers deployed at the border. Countries like Bangladesh and Afghanistan openly backed India. The SAARC summit that was to be held in Islamabad was cancelled. The global community emphasized that India had the right to act for its security. Even strong ally China did not back Pakistan. The 2016 strike showed that the era of talk diplomacy had ended. By crossing the line of control, India showed the world that it is prepared to walk the tough talk.
Well, let's hear what the expert have to say about the Modi government's policy regarding Pakistan.
It has created a new normal. Now any government will act, whether it's the Modi government or any other government, maybe led by the BJP, maybe led by some other party, will not be afraid of acting and entering Pakistan territory. This is both good and bad, because it's good because the people feel that it's the right thing to do. It's a tit for tat action. But it does not bode well for a war by accident.
Modi government was, Modi himself was known to be tougher in his approach, and it was expected. So for him to be making those overtures was a new thing. And then for him to go to Nawaz Sharif, for his birthday that year, when was it, 3 years ago, and that was also an overture. But when it came to Pulwama, then he decided, as I say, enough is enough, and you've got to take tough measures. You cannot have us, pushed over like that. And 40 of our CRPF members have died, and the opinion in the country has supported him, because that is the sentiment in the country also, that you needed to give a clear message to Pakistan. So in that sense, I would say there is a shift of strategy. Let's see what follows. Of course, the PM has been talking very, very tough in recent days, that we are not going to sit quiet.
All right, getting reactions from my guests on the panel right now. Shekhar Iyer, starting first with you. Before we talk about India's Pakistan policy over the last 5 years, let's talk about the surgical strikes and your thoughts on that. The first one.
Yeah, I think if you look at Prime Minister Modi's policy, even before he was sworn into office in the May of 2014, he took an unusual, very innovative way of sending out a message of goodwill and peace by inviting all the SAARC head of states to attend his swearing-in ceremony. I think this was a big message to them, that given his tough image, that he is no warmonger, that he is willing to start on a new chapter of goodwill, harmony and friendship, and it was for them to respond. And we saw there was a good response. Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif attended, so did other neighboring countries. And I think subsequent to that, he did take forward in terms of even surprising his host Nawaz Sharif by turning up at his
daughters.
For his daughter's family occasion, and as well as greeting him on his birthday. So the whole idea was to show, look, the past can be past, and that he is not allowing his own what is seen as his own tendency to be a hardliner, because Prime Minister wanted to move away from that image of being a hawk or anything. But unfortunately, I think the kind of response that came from across the border did not help matters. So you saw the first attack on Pathankot, which came after his a surprise visit to Lahore, which was just for a day. Then followed by Pathankot, which was at a air base. The next was at Uri, which was a military administrative headquarters. Now after that, the big question began to arise among even those supporters of Prime Minister Modi as to, has the Prime Minister undergone such a change that he looks helpless? And also, what about the morale of our forces? Now, you are seeing that they are crossing the Rubicon, in the sense that First, they were targeting, in Jammu Kashmir, particularly the paramilitary forces, and you had those cross-border shelling. But here it was, they were coming and striking at your military bases and installations, which means that needed to be responded. And Prime Minister gave out a message, look, he would do all his best to extend his hand for friendship, but when it came to a situation where a response was needed, not a reaction, a response was needed, you saw the surgical strike, which was a message, look, we are targeting these terrorist launching pads. Now, cut to what has happened in February of 2019, we saw that after that Pulwama attack on our CRPF convoy, which 40 of our Jawans were killed, the entire paradigm had to be shifted, had to be changed to show, look, this is, because a surgical strike 2.0 was not enough. So therefore, a target was chosen, a target to send out a message that where the terror base, actually the terrorist base, which is supposed to be the recreational and the retraining center of sorts, was targeted belonging to Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is a banned organization as far as we are concerned, and we think it's a terrorist outfit, along with other names, other groups. So therefore, this surgical strike sent out a message, not just in the Pakistan occupied areas, we can do and hit at those places which are deep inside Pakistan and are virtually the terror factories where you churn out young misguided youths to target innocent people in the valley. I think that was a bigger message, but also the care was taken to see that it was a purely an action against terrorist bases. None of the Pakistani military installations or anything was touched, and it was ensured that the civilian casualties, if any, is to the minimal, and it is only the terrorists and the terror machinery that is defined.
Right.
I think that itself was a very carefully considered, calibrated decision, which can only come from a leadership which knows what it wants and which is not out to get into some warmongering.
Right, KV Prasad, like Shekhar pointed out earlier in his, in his reply, was talking about how, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during his initial days, tried to extend an olive branch to the Pakistanis, and but that was not reciprocated the way we wanted that to happen. But now we've seen Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan go down that way. He's talking about how he wants to have talks with India and so on and so forth. But the atmosphere at this present juncture isn't right, is it?
Certainly. I mean, there is a mood in the country is not of talks, and I think the government of India, through multiple times, has made it clear that it wants Pakistan to act and act decisively against terror. In fact, in the last few days after Pulwama, the whole effort is to bring international pressure onto Pakistan to dismantle those terror networks. And that has been made amply clear, and that's one reason why we see increasingly global support for what the Indian response post-Pulwama. The Balakot attack, you saw the international statements that came. It was very clear, reflected, and following that was the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, which called the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj for a guest of honor after 50 years. So these are all signals saying that the policy shift that the government of India did is moving in the direction. Just to add to one more thing, what Shekhar was mentioning, the first overture by the Prime Minister, even before he was sworn in as the Prime Minister, was the invitation to all the SARC members. And post that, there were talks about talks, which again, if you remember, got sabotaged from within when they wanted to talk to the Hurriyat leaders. When the Pakistan representative in India wanted to talk to Hurriyat leaders, and Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister, was scheduled to travel for the bilateral meeting, which got pulled off because India said this is no longer acceptable to us. So since then, we had a series of issues. Of course, still on the way back from Afghanistan, 25th December 2015, he goes and greets Nawaz Sharif on his birthday, the Prime Minister of Pakistan then, and attends the family function. So again, a gesture, but immediately after we had the Pathankot attack. So since then, things have not really, they have deteriorated. And now I think India is very clear that the statement that is always made, talks and terror cannot go together.
Right, right. Praful Ketkar, how would you look back at India's Pakistan policy over the last 5 years?
I have a different way of looking at it. Though Prime Minister Modi was trying to give a hand of friendship, we shouldn't forget that in last 5 years, the northeast frontier terror activity has completely almost sidelined, and as far as the Pakistan sponsored terrorism is concerned, it is again confined to certain areas of Jammu Kashmir, especially the valley. In the rest of India, the civilian attacks, in fact, I believe that Uri and Pathankot was out of frustration, and even Pulwama, because now they are compelled to attack because there is a clear-cut coordination that is being established between the intelligence, the armed forces, and the the political messaging to all these agencies who are operating on the ground, that no tolerance to terrorism. And no tolerance to terrorism was the message, again, was there, as Shekharji has rightly said, even before the mandate was given. So, if first line of mandate was against corruption, the second was also against terrorism. India was looking helpless to the proxy war, and it was looking like as if we don't have any answer to it. We didn't want to cross the line, and that line was not just physical, even it was psychological. I think it not just post Uri surgical strike in Pak occupied Jammu Kashmir, not just the recent air strike in Balakot, but even what happened in collaboration with Myanmar, all these were breaking those psychological barriers that when it comes to the proxy war, India is not going to take it silently. India is going to retaliate, and India has an answer. And if the operations on the ground have given the free hand, they can give that answer. Restoring that confidence in the nation was a key, and again a leadership aspect comes here.
Sure. Before I wrap up this segment and move on, KV Prasad, the quick reaction on, is this particular issue, India's Pak policy, what happened in Pulwama, which was followed up by Balakot, the surgical strikes in 2016, are these going to be election, are these issues going to be on the minds of the electorate when we go to polls later this year?
Certainly we'll have to wait. The fact is, Pakistan and terrorism has something which has been bothering the people for a long time, and if certain acts have been taken in an effort to try and eliminate this scourge, now that it'll take it's a longer haul, but the kind of two actions, the surgical strikes at Uri and now the Balakot, has was put many a time by even the government, is a demonstration of what India can do. So that it has the capability. I think the finance minister also mentioned a few days ago that if what US Navy SEALs could do in Abbottabad, so things are changing. I mean, there's a thing of delivery. Now that is something which Praful also mentioned. The confidence had to be restored among the people. That and I remember soon after that, in one of the rallies, the Prime Minister did mention the country is safe, is in safe hands.
Right. Right. All right. We'll have to wait and see really as far as this particular issue will be a poll issue is what KV Prasad is suggesting. On that note, we'll slip into a short break now. On the other side, our discussion and our program will continue. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching India Votes 2019 on Rajya Sabha television. Well, even at home, violence was dealt with an iron hand. Several measures were taken to deal with the menace of Naxalism. Here's a look.
In 2010, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh called Naxalism the biggest internal security challenge for the country.
The problems of terrorism and left-wing extremism constitute two major challenges that our society and polity face today.
5 years later, in 2015, the NDA government identified 106 districts in 10 states as left-wing extremism affected. 35 of these were most affected districts, accounting for 80 to 90% of the violence. As a multi-pronged strategy to fight the menace, the government launched the National Policy and Action Plan that combined development works and tougher security measures. 4 years later, results on the ground showed incidents of violence dropped 20% and related deaths came down 34% in 2017 as compared to 2013. Geographically as well, the spread of left-wing extremism violence shrunk from 76 districts in 2013 to just 58 districts in 2017. Today, 30 districts account for 90% of LWE violence. Home Minister Rajnath Singh has said casualties among security forces have declined by 53 to 55%.
माओवादी उग्रवाद में भारी गिरावट आई है। सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेज की पहले जो किलिंग होती थी उनमें 53 से लेकर 55% की गिरावट आई है और भौगोलिक क्षेत्र की दृष्टि से भी यदि देखा जाए तो 40 से लेकर 45% की उसमें कमी आई है।
Another significant aspect was the action against left-wing extremist leaders under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act.
Well, let's now listen in to a few experts on Naxalism.
This needs a carrot and stick both, because at the end of the day, they are your people. They resort to violence and you want to bring them back into the mainstream. So while they resort to violence, you've got to use firm methods, but ultimately the long-term strategy of bringing them around and also socio-economic development of the region, the lack of which fuels the rise of an ideology like Naxalism. All those things, it has to be a holistic approach, which every government has to do. Some may take a tougher line at one particular moment, some may take a softer line, but every government will have to contend with this.
The Modi government has been using the police forces far more aggressively, and I think it is thanks to also the West Bengal government and the Chhattisgarh government's active cooperation. The situation on the ground looks to me better than what it was 5 years ago.
All right, time to begin our discussion with the panelists now. Shekhar Iyer, how has the Modi government dealt with the menace of Naxalism?
Well, I look at Modi government's policy regarding Maoists. At least there was 3 steps, there were distinct steps that we saw in the last 4 to 5 years, which one was the scaling up in terms of deployment, and the second was a scaling up in terms of coordination and sharing of intelligence, particularly among the Naxal affected states. And the third aspect was special measures to speed up development in those affected districts, including and notwithstanding particularly the last measure which the Prime Minister wanted was to take up the case of more than 100 most backward districts, of which 70 to 75% belong to those Maoist affected areas, where the bureaucrats who had earlier served on those districts and rose to become secretaries and chief secretaries and came to occupy high positions at Delhi, they were asked to go back to those districts where they had started out their career as the district collector, and where they were asked to share the best practices in terms of ensuring faster development. That is, model districts were taken up. I think that made a big difference in terms of conveying the message to the particularly the tribal areas and to the very poor people that this battle against the Maoists is against the violent culture of Maoists. It's not about eliminating them, but sending out a message that the state stands with the poor and the state is for development. Because unfortunately what we saw was Maoists who claim that they speak for the cause of the poor and for the exploited and the underprivileged, were themselves engaging in acts which were seen as blocking development, like they used to blow up schools. They used to blow bridges. They used to prevent contractors from doing the road development work in the fear that once the development were to reach some of the poor villages, probably they would lose their cadres. And along with that, I think the most important thing, apart from these three things, was crack down on the money factor which was fueling the Maoists. Particularly, we know about what is called the levy. The Maoists used to, indulge in extortion from a lot of people who were doing business in those areas, whether they were contractors, businessmen, even big industries which were involved in, say, mining or paper making. And this has happened in all those states, whether it is Jharkhand, whether it is Chhattisgarh, even parts of Andhra Pradesh, Odisha. This has been a problem. So the demonetization had also a big impact in terms of the money that were collected by Maoists on the name of, for their cause, but which was actually an extortion. So that needed some kind of a hammer and sickle approach, I would say. I mean, to use the communist term. So you had to cut at the root of it and also smash this whole strategy of Maoists to use, because what we got to hear was the kind of collection was going to the tunes of more than even 10 to 50,000 crores or even more per annual. And that money was somehow coming into cities and was with the people who were the sympathizers, because what had happened was no longer people were being lured, young people were being lured into the movement, in what is called during the organization stage and the guerrilla stage. But they were actually paying some kind of a salary for these armed men. So that nexus had to be broken. So therefore, I think it was a multi-pronged approach. And as your statistics show, there have been good results in curbing violence.
Right. KV Prasad, the fact that there are far fewer takers now for the left ideology, can that also be attributed to the to a drop in extremism?
Well, I think more than left, this is ultra left. This particular ideology that was being pursued, and this is little distinct from this is distinct from the left, which has been in the mainstream politics for a very long time. Just to add to what Shekhar was saying, if you remember, this interstate coordination is a mechanism which was set up almost 20 years ago, with kind of the 8 Naxal affected states at the top, the Ministry of Home Affairs being the nodal agency where intelligence information would pour in. But over the years, this was fine-tuned, and also now that you have the technological know-how and the faster streaming of information flowing up and back and forth, this integration of networks plus police modernization that went into it. And largely also remember that this was not, is also visualized by the government of India, successive governments, as a socio-economic problem, not just a law and order issue. And that is one reason what Shekhar referred to was the development aspects was looked into in these backward areas, where the people residing in those tribal areas, where remote areas, where in jungle, where development was scarce. So to reach, he referred to even mobile towers were blown up, electricity substations were blown up, simply to deny the advantage both of development to the people who needed it, and also to reverse the security forces who could have then moved in. I think there were certain innovative schemes, partly what probably referred to was, like the solar lantern scheme, which was, the idea was, you don't need a transformer, you don't need a line, you don't need the hardware. You kind of work with kind of new technology. So I think a series of steps have gone. Of course, there will be a Sukma here and there, which has been happened time and again. But I'm sure the figures also indicate the level of violence and the attacks have shown a significant decline.
Does that mean Naxalism is no longer an internal threat, or is that threat going to continue to be there, Praful Ketkar?
See, the actual threat is ideological. The ideology of violence that gets sanctioned intellectually. Even if we have seen in the terms of experts, here also we are listening that it is basically a socio-economic problem. Sorry, I've been to Bastar. People there do not know who Mao is, where Naxalbari is. Who is teaching them this? Who is giving that sanctity? That the success of this government is, it has equated Maoist violence to other kinds of terrorist violence. and dealt with it the same way who is getting into the violent activity. When the Ayushman Bharat was launched in Chhattisgarh, the clear message was given not to attend Prime Minister program. And still, common masses, women, children, they actually went there. What was the reason? You know, so the kind of narrative that has changed about the idea of Naxalism or the ideology of Maoism. Please try and understand, right from Naxalbari movement to People's War Group to MCC to now CPI Maoist, each and every time the Politburo was highly intellectual, urbanized, educated, middle class youth who guided them with this ideology. Who are they? What are their inspirations? What are their funding sources? That are also being targeted. On the other hand, the people who were, you know, either they had a different issue. They had issues related to forest rights. They had issues related to local police machinery. They had issues related to local money lenders. Those issues were addressed. So if you have this integrated and combined approach, then you get totally different kind of results. And one of the key parameters, I believe, is the way number of districts affected by this menace has come down. Not in terms of just actual violence or attack, but the districts that are affected. So I'm not saying that the menace is over. We have to fight it out because the sympathizers and well-wishers and the ideological covers are still existing. The huge monetary interest, the parallel systems that have evolved over a period of time, that are key aspect, and that has to be completely dismantled. Demonetization to some extent gave a dent to it, but unless you clearly, you know, eliminate the ground for giving this fodder, you know, of the fighting people on the ground, this cannot be completely wiped out.
All right. On that note, then, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of India Votes 2019. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and sharing your views on the leadership, the decisive leadership that we saw of Prime Minister Narendra Modi over the last 5 years. With that, it's a wrap on the program. We'll be back same time tomorrow. We'll talk about new aspects and new things as we lead up to the general elections later on this year.